Rachel Reeves has done it again. The Shadow Chancellor has doubled down on Labour's controversial decision to overhaul inheritance tax for farmers, a move that has sparked a fierce backlash across the UK. Farmers and rural communities are calling the policy a catastrophe, claiming it threatens the survival of family farming. But Reeves remains unshaken, defending the changes as a fair deal in a high-profile interview on GB News that has since gone viral. Labour's decision to cap 100% inheritance tax relief at £1 million for agricultural and business property has left farming families facing a new 20% tax on assets above the threshold. While this is a reduction from the standard 40% inheritance tax, critics argue it's still a devastating blow to family farms, where most wealth is tied up in land, equipment, and other essential assets.
This government had to make a number of difficult decisions in the budget last month to put our public finances back on a firm footing. Difficult decisions on spending, on welfare, and on tax. But I would just say this around agricultural property relief. If you're a couple who own a farm, including a home on the farm, you can pass on £3 million tax-free to the next generation. And beyond that £3 million, you are taxed at half of the rate that everybody else is taxed for inheritance tax, at 20% compared to 40%. And where there is an inheritance tax bill, you can pay that over 10 years interest-free in a way that no one else paying inheritance tax can. So I think this is a fair deal for farmers, whilst also ensuring that we bring in the money to get our public finances back on a firm.
This government had to make difficult decisions in the budget last month to put our public finances back on a firm footing. If you're a couple who own a farm, including a home on the farm, you can pass on £3 million tax-free to the next generation. Beyond that, £3 million, you are taxed at half the rate that everybody else is taxed for inheritance tax, at 20% compared to 40%. And where there is an inheritance tax bill, you can pay that over 10 years interest-free, in a way that no one else paying inheritance tax can. I think this is a fair deal for farmers. Reeves framed the policy as a balanced approach that considers the fiscal challenges facing the country while offering some relief to the farming community. But for many farmers, her words have fallen on deaf ears as the practical implications of the policy threaten to dismantle livelihoods built over generations. The National Farmers Union, NFU, has taken the lead in organising resistance to the policy, with NFU President Tom Bradshaw delivering scathing remarks. This isn't just a tax hike, it's a dagger aimed at the heart of rural Britain. Farms aren't just businesses, they're lifelines for communities, contributors to national food security, and deeply tied to family heritage. Labour's decision risks tearing that apart. The NFU has mobilised farmers for a massive protest in Westminster next week, with 1,800 participants, triple the originally expected turnout, preparing to send a powerful message to the government. Farmers will march through the capital in boots and wellies, symbolising the working-class backbone of the countryside, with children leading the procession on toy tractors as a poignant reminder of the legacy they hope to preserve. Farmers argue that while £1 million may sound like a substantial threshold, it barely covers the cost of modest agricultural operations in today's market. With the average price of farmland in the UK around £10,000 per acre, many farms far exceed the cap, leaving families with no choice but to sell off portions of their land, or the entire farm, just to pay the tax. This policy treats us like we're sitting on piles of cash, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Every penny we have is tied up in the land, machinery and livestock. If we're forced to sell, we're not passing on a farm, we're passing on debt and heartbreak. These concerns have resonated across the farming community, with many warning that the changes could pave the way for large corporations to buy up struggling family farms, further corporatising British agriculture. The loss of independent farms, critics argue, would have devastating ripple effects on rural communities, food security and the environment. Politically, this issue has become a lightning rod, with Labour finding itself under siege from multiple directions. The Conservative Party has seized the opportunity to paint the policy as a betrayal of the countryside, with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak taking direct aim at Reeves during a recent rally. This is Labour's idea of fairness, taxing the very people who feed our nation while pretending they're doing them a favour. It's insulting, it's short-sighted, and it's typical of a party that doesn't understand rural Britain, Sunak declared to thunderous applause. Adding to the controversy, Welsh First Minister Eluned Morgan sparked outrage with a dismissive comment telling farmers to calm down a bit about the inheritance tax changes. Her remarks were met with a fierce backlash, with Welsh Tory leader Andrew R.T. Davies accusing her of being completely out of touch with reality. Farmers and rural activists have flooded social media with condemnations, using hashtags like #SheSaveOurFarms and Farmers Fight Back to rally support. The protests planned for Westminster are shaping up to be a defining moment in the inheritance tax saga. Organisers have promised a highly visible demonstration, complete with speeches from farming leaders and emotional testimonies from families whose futures are now uncertain. Tom Bradshaw is expected to deliver a blistering keynote address, calling on Labour to scrap the inheritance tax cap entirely. Insiders say the speech will frame this as a non-negotiable demand to protect rural livelihoods. Meanwhile, smaller farming groups are amplifying the cause through social media campaigns, ensuring the issue stays in the public eye. Many are sharing personal stories of how the policy could devastate their families, with posts highlighting the human cost of what they see as an out-of-touch decision by Labour. Beyond the immediate controversy, the inheritance tax row has exposed broader tensions between Labour and rural voters. Historically, Labour has struggled to gain traction in the countryside, and policies like this risk deepening the divide. Critics argue that Labour's urban-centric approach leaves them disconnected from the unique challenges facing rural communities, a perception that could have significant electoral consequences in upcoming local and national elections. Financial experts have also weighed in, warning that the policy may backfire economically. Steve Brown, an analyst specialising in agricultural policy, noted, "While this policy might generate short-term revenue, the long-term costs could outweigh the benefits. Undermining the viability of family farms risks reducing domestic food production, increasing reliance on imports, and weakening rural economies. This isn't just bad for farmers, it's bad for Britain." With the protest just days away and pressure mounting from both political opponents and grassroots movements, Labour's leadership faces a critical decision. Will they hold firm on the policy, or will they backtrack to avoid further alienating rural voters? So far, Reeves has shown no signs of retreat, but the growing unrest could force a rethink. As tensions escalate, one thing is certain. The inheritance tax row has become a defining issue not just for Reeves, but for the entire Labour government. With rural communities united in opposition and political rivals circling, the stakes couldn't be higher. Will Labour stand its ground, or will the pressure from farmers and critics force a dramatic U-turn? Stay tuned as this explosive story unfolds. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash the like button to get the latest updates on this developing scandal.